The Holy Gospel according to Matthew. And when Jesus got into the boat, his disciples followed him. A windstorm suddenly arose on the sea, so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him up, saying, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, you of little faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a dead calm. They were amazed, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" This is the gospel of the Lord. LSTC, it is again an honor and privilege to be here at my alma mater, where I got my team certificate as well as my MDiv. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Metropolitan Chicago Synod. It is an honor and privilege yet again to sponsor and support and participate in another Black History Month celebration with you. We can't stay here. We've got to move on. We have to go to the other side. The water beneath them, the storm in front of them. There was no turning back. It was March 7, 1965. 600 civil rights marchers left the local church. They set out on foot for a 50-mile journey from Selma, Alabama, to the state's capital in Montgomery. These leaders were tired of black people being denied the right to vote. Tired that black people only had 2 days a month to register. And if they registered, then they had to pass a fictitious literacy test. And if they managed to pass the test, then they had to pay a poll tax, 1 month's wages, for the possibility of going to a voting booth. So as they left the church after their prayer service in Selma, they marched as we do today in silence. After about 6 blocks, they reached the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The water beneath them, the storm in front of them. There was no turning back. As they arrived at the bridge's highest point, the wave of blue officers gave them reason to pause, but they didn't. As the marchers arrived within shouting distance of the officers, they tried to kneel and pray without provocation, without notice. Suddenly, officers put on their mask and began to hit, beat, kick, punch the marchers with billy clubs, and sprayed them with tear gas. The late Congressman John Lewis was the first person to be struck. He was hit with the baton on the crown of his head. He thought we were simply trying to go to the other side of the bridge. The other side. The other side represented some reversal of fortune. If there was injustice in Selma, then surely there would be justice in Montgomery. If there was hatred in Selma, then surely there would be love in Montgomery. If there was isolation in Selma, then on the other side, surely there would be collaboration. If there was theft, then on the other side, surely there'd be reparations. You ever feel like some of the storms of your life are the result of you attempting to follow Christ? Surely there are some people in here who felt like I was just following Christ when I traveled from another country here to go to school, and yet I find myself in storms. I moved into a community that was supposed to be better for me, thinking I was following Christ, yet I find myself in a storm. This job seemed ideal for me. I prayed about it. I looked for it. I took it, and yet I find myself in a storm. I tried to retire. I had the investment set. But now with this current market, I found myself in a storm. I took the call. I went for ordination. I find myself after the Sermon on the Mount, after ministering to crowds and providing healing, Jesus tells the disciples, we can't stay here. We've got to move on. It's not before you, but in chapter 8 on the 18th verse, Jesus uses these words, let's go to the other side of the lake. The disciples get into the boat. Suddenly the wind begins to beat against the structure and water raging. Yep, the disciples are in a storm because they're attempting to follow Jesus. With the water beneath them and the storm in front of them, they recognize that they have precious cargo in the ship. They recognize that Jesus is with them. Jesus gets up, calms the storm, and they are amazed. Now, I got to be honest that there is a problem in the text right here for me. And it has a lot to do with me reading it with my mind of today. Because Jesus says, or asks the question, why are you afraid? And while I know he's talking to seasoned fishermen who know a little bit about water and should know a little bit about storms, when I read it today with the lens of the Selma March, we're afraid because they're killing us. We're afraid because they're using billy clubs. We're afraid because every police interaction, we die. All storms aren't the same. All storms aren't the same. But I do recognize that the good news of the text that I really bite down into is that Jesus called them to go to the other side. And when Jesus calls us to go to the other side, Jesus goes with us. On March the 24th, a couple weeks later in Selma, Dr. King had put out a call for rostered leaders of all faith, leaders of all denominations, to come and march with them again from Selma to Montgomery. After this 4-day journey, 25,000 people entered the Capitol building. They made it to the other side. But it's important that we know that this was the third march, and that Jesus was present on all 3 marches. Jesus don't just show up when we're successful. Jesus is present when he calls us to go to the other side. Sometimes there are storms, and based on the text today, it is my learning that Jesus is present with us in the storms. Christ calls us to go to the other side, and Christ goes with us. LSTC, I think Christ is saying, we can't stay here no more. No, literally, we can't stay here no more. I think we're being called to the other side of 55th Street. LSTC, I think Christ is saying to racism, we can't stay here no more. It's time for us to go to the other side. Sexism, we can't stay here no more. Redlining, we can't stay here no more. Mass incarceration, we can't stay here no more. ELCA, we can't stay here no more. It's time for us to go to the other side. He can't promise us there won't be no storms. But Christ promises to go with us. Yes, sir. In a moment, we will impose ashes to remind us of our own mortality. Said another way, God will be reminding us we can't stay here. But it's also a reminder with the sign of the cross of our baptismal promises that Christ promised to be with you always, even till the end of the age. So it's also a reminder of Christ's presence as we journey with Christ on our 40-day journey. Amen.